Hello and welcome to Unacademy. Imagine a nation where the constitution is quietly rewritten, not by politicians of the parliament, but by just one military leader. Where the headline reads Constitutional Amendment, yet the outcome is effectively a military coup without the use of force. That's the unfolding reality in Pakistan today. With the passage of the 27th Amendment to the Pakistani Constitution,
The Constitution 27th Amendment Bill 2025, as reported by the Standing Committee, be taken into consideration at once.
Army Chief Asim Munir has essentially staged a coup, not a military coup, but a constitutional coup. The country now stands at a crossroads because Pakistan is no longer a theatre of power competition between the civilian and military leadership. Instead, the army appears to be formalizing the military's dominance and making one man, that is the army chief himself, the supreme leader with constitutional protection. The controversial amendment makes wide-sweeping changes to key military command and leadership positions and places all critical decision-making powers within the domain of the Chief of Army Staff. In short, the army chief will become the constitution's architect, the arbiter of the nuclear command structure, the one who stands above removal or even legal proceedings. This is a dream constitution for a dictatorial military general, but it is wrapped in constitutional clothing. However, this isn't new terrain for Pakistan. Our dear neighbor has seen years and years of direct military rule under Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Zia-ul Haq, and Pervez Musharraf. But what's different this time is that Asim Munir is giving himself complete immunity and even lifelong constitutional protection. So for India, this is not just a neighbor's internal power struggle. A militarized Pakistan with constitutional cover for one man's supremacy raises profound implications for several issues, such as the Kashmir issue, for cross-border state-sponsored terrorism, for India-Pakistan nuclear posture, for regional stability, and even for the very foundation of India-Pakistan relations. For UPSC aspirants, this particular chapter in Pakistan is a case study in constitutional capture, in civil-military imbalance, and Pakistan's internal politics. So in the next few minutes, we will unpack how and why this structural shift has taken place in Pakistan. What pattern does it echo by drawing parallels with the past Pakistani military dictators? And why India must sit up and take note. So welcome to this insightful discussion. But before we start, I have a very important announcement for serious UPSC aspirants. So if you're looking for guided classes with interactive sessions with your educators and one-on-one mentorship, Unacademy is presenting the Platinum Batch, which is starting on the 17th of November. Under the Platinum program, you will be having an opportunity to attend live lectures where your camera is also turned on and the educator gets to see you and hold you accountable. Ensure that you attend all the classes and provide an opportunity for a two-way interaction between the student and the educator. This will include one-on-one mentorship by our top educators and as well as test series and enough study material, which is more than sufficient to help you crack the civil services examination. So those who are interested to enroll for the upcoming Platinum classes that starts from 17 November, please contact the number given below or click on the link provided in the video description. Now let's begin the discussion and let's talk about the development in Pakistan. According to me, this is one of the biggest groundbreaking developments in Pakistan's internal politics. The passage of the 27th Constitutional Amendment. In the last few days, it has been passed with the Pakistani Senate and the National Assembly, and it has been signed into law by Pakistan's President, Mr. Zardari. Within 4 to 5 days, the entire process of passing this critical constitutional amendment bill has been carried out. And this is one of the most significant constitutional and political change that you get to see in Pakistan. So let's understand, why is this so important? Because experts believe that the army chief Asim Munir is the brainchild behind this constitutional amendment. The amendment has been designed to suit the power interests of the current army chief Asim Munir. It elevates his position, almost gives him supreme authority and control over key institutions and structures in Pakistan, particularly with regard to the military command structure, with regard to the state's foreign policy. And this could be quite alarming for its neighbor, India. So experts are calling this a constitutional coup. Not your regular military coup, which is carried out through the use of force, where the military topples the legitimate government. But instead, the civilian government is being subdued through these constitutional changes. The current ruling party in power, the ruling coalition, they are in a compromise with the deep state of Pakistan. So this collusion and the undermining of checks and balances in Pakistan's democracy, the weakening of judicial accountability, this marks the death of Pakistan's democracy in Pakistan's classic style. So if you look at the changes that have been done, we need to understand what changes will happen to the core military command structure because of the 27th Constitutional Amendment. This amendment brings a change to Article 243 of the Pakistani Constitution. This will lead to the abolition of the office of the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. Now, in any country with major armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, there would be a Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, which is headed by a chairman to bring synergy and harmony between the three armed forces. So Pakistan also had one such position. So this office is being abolished and it will take effect by the end of the month. On 27th November, this essential office would be abolished. And this office would now be taken over by the army chief himself. The army chief will assume a position being created known as the CDF, the Chief of Defense Forces. And by the way, please note, the current army chief Asim Munir is set to retire on the 28th of November. Look at the timing. It's not a coincidence. There is a clear link. Right before the retirement of Asim Munir, he will be appointing himself as the Chief of Defense Forces, which will give him complete authority, control, and command over the three armed forces of Pakistan. Not just the army, the navy and the air force included. Now, this is a very big change as far as the military leadership position is concerned. In a way, this is the equivalent of India's CDS, the Chief of Defense Staff, which was created in 2019. But you may ask, what's so different between India's CDS and the CDF position that Pakistan is now creating? Because please understand, in India, the military establishment is always subservient and subordinate to the elected civilian government. The Chief of Defense Staff in India acts as a single point military advisor to the government, to the defense minister. The CDS has a defined role. The CDS does not exercise operational control over the three armed forces. That is left to the respective chiefs, the army chief, the navy chief, and the air force chief. But only for the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, the CDS in India acts as the chairman to bring the three forces together, to create synergy, to build harmony between them, to optimize the defense budget, to ensure there is no overlap in defense procurement, to create joint theater commands. That is the objective of India's CDS, and eventually the military establishment, including the CDS, the highest ranking military officer, would be under the leadership of the elected civilian government. Because India is a thriving, functional democracy, not just in letter but in spirit. But that is not the case with our neighbor Pakistan. Once Asim Munir becomes the CDF by ex officio, meaning by virtue of being the army chief, he will also get to be the Chief of Defense Forces, and most likely he will be exercising direct control over all the three armed forces. We have seen the trouble Asim Munir has caused when he was just the chief of the army. So imagine what might happen when he gets complete control over Navy and Air Force as well. Of course, the army chief exercises control over the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence agency. So this essentially will make Asim Munir a sort of a supreme military leader. So does this mean the civilian government will be thrown out? No. The Prime Minister will remain, the elected coalition government will remain in power, the President's office will also remain in power. But the civilian government's authority would be subdued. They would essentially become even more subservient to the military leadership as Asim Munir assumes almost dictatorial powers. Now, the concern here is that the serving army chief will get to become the CDF. Now, let's say Asim Munir's term gets extended. He would be the Chief of Defense Forces by virtue of holding the office of the Army Chief Staff, right? And this essentially might allow Asim Munir to continue. And also, don't forget, there is a new command structure being created for Pakistan's nuclear structure. Through this constitutional amendment to Article 243, the nuclear weapons of Pakistan, they are being brought under the National Strategic Command, the NSC. It's a new organizational structure being created. And this will be headed by a commander who will be from the Pakistani army, who will be appointed by the president on the recommendations of the army chief, that is the Chief of Defense Forces. So it means the army will basically get direct control over Pakistan's nuclear weapons, both the strategic arsenal and the tactical nukes that are in Pakistan's possession. Now again, you might ask what's so different about this. We all knew that Pakistani military controls everything in Pakistan. See, previously it was all informal, but now it is being formalized with a constitutional structure mandating this. The Pakistani army chief, who is also the Chief of Defense Forces, will recommend to the president a senior commander from the army to be appointed as the head of the National Strategic Command, thereby bringing Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, both the strategic and tactical nukes, under the direct command of the Pakistani army chief, who would now be the Chief of Defense Force. I think that is enough to tell you what the threat level would be for India. Apart from this, Asim Munir is further promoting himself and retaining those privileges. I'm sure all of you are aware that after Operation Sindoor, Asim Munir gave himself a promotion. He essentially made himself the Field Marshal, the second Field Marshal of Pakistan after Ayub Khan. So this rank, a 5-star rank, which is given to Field Marshals or the equivalent officers in the other forces, this rank would be permanent. It would be a lifetime recognition, which means Asim Munir will retain the rank and all the privileges that come along with it. And he can continue to remain in uniform for life. And if at all this rank has to be taken away, this position has to be taken away, then there is a very complex arrangement created through this constitutional arrangement. Through this new amendment, you almost require a type of impeachment with 2/3 majority support in the Pakistani parliament in order to take away the 5-star rank, the Field Marshal rank, which is accorded to Asim Munir right now. Now you tell me, in a country where former Pakistani presidents, prime ministers have been assassinated, they have been exiled, they have been even thrown into jail, do you really think ordinary MPs in the parliament would oppose the ruling army chief and vote for his impeachment? So in such a militarized state, this structure which is now being created will guarantee that the CDF, who is the Field Marshal now, that is Asim Munir, would never be stripped of his rank. And he will remain in this position throughout his life. And if he has to extend the tenure of the army chief, let's say in collusion with the president and the prime minister, Asim Munir would, for all practical reasons, be the supreme leader of the country. And this would be constitutionally protected. Of course, this was the case previously as well, but there were some checks and balances. There was some level of accountability, at least, whatever existed. But now even that is being taken away. And without that opposition, without that accountability, the CDF, who will be the army chief, will become a sort of a supreme leader. So essentially, this is a military dictatorship of sorts, but in an unofficial manner through a constitutional protection. Coming to the accountability changes which are happening, this constitutional amendment weakens Pakistan's judiciary, the Supreme Court. And please note down this point, very, very important. 5-star officers are being given lifetime legal immunity, meaning they can't be tried in a court. So since this rank of Field Marshal for Asim Munir is being given for the lifetime, he will enjoy legal immunity from any kind of prosecution throughout his life. So, for whatever decisions and actions he would have taken as the army chief and now as the chief of defense forces, he would not be legally liable for it. He can never be tried in a court. So, this is being provided constitutionally now. No criminal proceedings. This protection was reserved only for serving presidents and governors of the states, the provinces in Pakistan. That too only when the president or the governor was holding office. Even they would be legally liable after they would step down from office. But that would not be the case with 5-star rank officers like field marshals such as Asim Munir. So lifetime legal immunity for their actions and decisions. And a new constitutional court is being established. A parallel judicial structure is being created which undermines the Supreme Court of Pakistan. So a federal constitutional court will take away some of the critical powers of the Supreme Court. I'm sure some of you might be familiar that no matter how weak Pakistan's democracy was, the Supreme Court, at least once in a while, it had the courage to stand up to the government or the military leadership and keep them under check sometimes. Even the likes of Imran Khan, Pervez Musharraf, they have been reined in by Pakistan Supreme Court. But now this is not going to happen. Why? Because all constitutional cases will move to the new Federal Constitutional Court. The Supreme Court will be restricted only to civil and criminal matters. Only civil criminal cases will be heard by the Supreme Court. All constitutional matters. For example, dispute between federal government and the provinces, center state issues, or enforcement of fundamental rights, or any other constitutional question. Those cases would be directly taken up by this new judiciary, the new Federal Constitutional Court, and this would be controlled largely by the executive. The constitutional amendment states that judges to the new Federal Constitutional Court will be appointed by the executive, giving the executive direct control over this new court that will deal with constitutional cases. Now, can you see the entire link, the connection? Asim Munir virtually becomes the supreme leader, exercising a degree of control over the civilian government, the executive. The same executive will appoint judges to this court. So if at all cases come up here against Asim Munir, no judge in this court would rule against Asim Munir. Previously, the Supreme Court, at least once in a while, if not every time, would stand up against the government or against any abuse of power and against the deep state of Pakistan. So going forward, this is not going to happen. So as a result, the Chief of Defense Forces would essentially have unchecked powers with zero accountability, with lifelong legal immunity. And that is where the real concern lies. Now, again, some of you might have a counter argument. You might say, sir, we have seen such dictatorships in the past where Pakistani governments have been toppled with force, with violence, and military leaders have taken over the country. So what's so different about Asim Munir, what he has done? Don't you think it's much better? Now, let me break that myth. See, Pakistan has seen years and years of military rule, correct? The first major military dictatorship was under Ayub Khan in 1958. Then there was a short period in 1960s under Yahya Khan, and then came Zia-ul Haq in the 1970s. From 1977 to 1980s, he even formalized his position into a sort of a president with a parliamentary system. Ayub Khan had also cemented his position as the president as well. Then Pervez Musharraf in 90s, 99 to early 2000s. He was simultaneously holding the position of the Chief of Army Staff while being the dictatorial president of the country as well. That was quite unique. So during these past dictatorships, you know what was the reason given by the Pakistani army to topple the government? They would always say that the government has become corrupt, that the government is not able to administer the country. That's why the military has to step in. So using this justification, they were toppling civilian governments. Be it Ayub Khan, Pervez Musharraf, Zia-ul Haq or Yahya Khan, they've all done the same. So it means that there was a tussle between the civilian government and the political opposition and the army on the other side. So at least someone was there to hold some sort of check on the army, right? Even though it was a dictatorship, eventually the political leaders, the opposition, would raise their voice at least in whatever manner possible. And we saw the restoration of elections and democracy and elected governments. But now you know what Asim Munir has done. Experts believe that Asim Munir is a masterclass in dictatorial governance. He's a very smart, shrewd leader. He has staged a coup in collusion with the current government. This has never happened in Pakistan before. Previously, whenever there were military coups, though it was violent, though it was a snatching of power by the military, it would be opposed by the political leadership. Though they would be jailed, they would be essentially targeted by the military establishment. At least some voices would come from the political leadership saying that this was wrong, that this was a crushing of democracy. But now, the current government is in complete collusion or partnership with Asim Munir. There is a coalition government in power, the Pakistan Muslim League, the Nawaz Sharif faction, with Pakistan People's Party of the Bhutto family. So there is a coalition government here which has the blessings of Asim Munir. And these changes are being done with the blessings of the Pakistani leadership, from Shehbaz Sharif to his brother Nawaz Sharif to the Zardari Bhutto family. They have blessed these constitutional changes, which means that there is a collusion between them. The army chief has colluded with the two main parties in power. So that means Pakistani army will not face any sort of political opposition, at least in the near term. So now, imagine this. Judicial accountability has been snatched away. Asim Munir has given permanent legal immunity for himself. Political opposition is almost in collusion with the army chief. That is why this is so alarming, so dangerous. So what are the implications? This could lead to the entrenchment of military dominance even further. Yes, the deep state of Pakistan, which is the military and the ISI, primarily led by the army, has always been controlling the Pakistani state and its policies secretly from behind. Though there would be a so-called elected government in the front, behind the scenes, it would be the military leadership, the intelligence establishment, which we call as the deep state, the hidden part of the Pakistani government, which was controlling the key policies and decisions. But now, this will be in the forefront. This would be legalized. It would be constitutional. Pakistan would say this is legitimate. And there are friends for Pakistan to recognize this as well. From United States to Turkey, there are many countries which are more than willing to recognize these changes as legitimate. So this will entrench the military establishment even further, deeper into Pakistan's politics. And more importantly, the tenure, the lifelong immunity, zero accountability, the crushing of Supreme Court's powers on constitutional matters, setting up a new court controlled by the executive, which will handle constitutional matters. So this completes the larger project of Asim Munir, which is to assume almost unchecked supreme authority in the country. So this has very, very serious implications for India, for the region, for the world, especially for India's security. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the deep state's obsession with Kashmir. From 1947 till date, the deep state's existence and survival is based on fueling the Kashmir crisis. This has been the obsession of the Pakistani army, the ISI. So imagine what could happen. Then think about the nature of cross-border state-sponsored terrorism that Pakistan has been sponsoring against India for decades. This would receive a further boost. See, please understand, we always know that there has been a dual power center in Pakistan. Correct. Even before, it was the same case where the deep state was undermining the civilian government. Even the elected leadership was being undermined. Correct. But as I said, the deep state has based its existence and survival by always triggering enmity with India, by projecting India as its enemy number one. So for that, it needs to fuel the Kashmir separatist movement and insurgency and terrorism. It needs to bleed India through 1,000 cuts by repeatedly sponsoring terror attacks, using its overt proxy groups to raise communal tensions in India, which we see happening currently. So this is only going to increase further. Now, if you look at the past of India-Pakistan relations, every time there was an improvement in relations between the two civilian governments, between the two prime ministers, Pakistan has always managed to pull off a big terror attack to disrupt the relations. And I can give you examples as well. When Prime Minister Vajpayee reached out to Nawaz Sharif in 1999, the Lahore summit was historic, leading to some friendly relations being established. But this was very quickly broken. Look at the parliament attacks that happened, right? It was by design. It was not a coincidence. Look at the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. When Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had started building a back channel diplomatic engagement with Parvez Musharraf, it was broken by the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. So there is a pattern to this, and history repeats itself when it comes to Pakistan. The pattern will keep repeating. So whenever there is better ties with India, we have seen the deep state using terrorism to derail the relations, because Pakistan's deep state wants a constant enemy, and that is India. India is the enemy number one for the deep state. That's how they project it for the Pakistani public. So though Pakistan is struggling economically, socially, the deep state never faces a rebellion. You never see large-scale protests, a revolutionary movement like Gen Z protests against Pakistani army. Why? Though Pakistani people, the ordinary citizens, they don't have jobs, they don't have education, they're struggling for power, they're struggling for basic necessities and essentials. And still they don't blame the leadership, they don't blame the army. They believe the army is essential for their survival. Why? That's because the deep state has created this propaganda that, look, India is our enemy number one. If our country, our people have to survive, army has to survive. The military, the ISI has to survive. This narrative has been created. Now, you will see a further push to this narrative as the civilian government is almost being wiped out. Not in a literal sense, but the constitutional changes which are happening will ensure that the deep state will now be at the forefront. It will no longer be hidden. It no longer need to control Pakistan's decisions covertly from behind. The army leadership will be at the forefront, and the civilian government will be there for the sake of it, completely subdued to the military leadership. And that is an alarming prospect for India. Now imagine a possible conflict like Operation Sindoor. Imagine the escalation Pakistan might do. And if the army chief, the CDF, who has direct control over the nuclear arsenal, what if they escalate to the nuclear level? Because Pakistan has shown it has no hesitation to deploy nuclear weapons. If not strategic nuclear weapons like ballistic missiles, definitely tactical nukes might be deployed in the battlefield. So for India, this changes everything about the nuclear equation, the nuclear arms race between the two. Don't forget, Pakistan has 170 plus nuclear warheads with multiple delivery systems available. So if the military leadership decides to deploy them in a combat with India, the situation changes completely for us. Be it India's retaliation against terror attacks, or punishing Pakistan, or ensuring that Pakistan is kept under check. If India ever has to use hard military power, we will have to think not 10 or 20 times, but 100 times. Because now that the CDF, the army chief, will be assuming direct command over the nuclear arsenal of Pakistan. Essentially, the nuclear button would be with the Pakistani establishment, the military establishment. So this will have serious geopolitical implications. You've all seen how Trump has embraced Asim Munir and the military leadership. Right? Even after the Pahalgam attack, India clearly presenting to the world that Pakistani state was responsible for this. And even after India launching targeted strikes through Operation Sindoor, Trump openly welcomed Asim Munir to the White House for a lunch. When Shahbaz Sharif was on a visit to the US, it was Asim Munir who stole the spotlight and had a very close interaction with Trump. And now Asim Munir has shown the willingness to become a client state for the US. Pakistan has always been a client state. You look at the Cold War period, Pakistan had no issues in aligning with the West, abandoning its historical connections with India. Look at what Pakistan did with regard to the Afghan conflict. It willingly became a part of the covert proxy war of the CIA against the Soviet forces which were occupying Afghanistan. The ISI willingly took money and weapons from the CIA and trained and funded the Mujahideen. And thus, it created prominence for itself in geopolitics. One reason why Pakistan remains relevant for Western countries is because Pakistan still has that control over the terror groups in the region, which could threaten Western interests, which could end up targeting Western countries like Al-Qaeda did. And that is what makes Pakistan more relevant geopolitically. And today, Asim Munir has basically said that he is willing to give away the resources of Pakistan. Shahbaz Sharif has stated that Pakistan is ready to share its mineral wealth, whatever they have, the critical minerals as they claim, and even the oil and other resources that they have. They're willing to share this with US. And there's a possibility of Pakistan accommodating American military bases. For example, you look at the Pasni port, which is close to the Gwadar port along the Makran coastline in Balochistan. Pakistan has already shown the willingness to lease out Pasni port for maybe China or for United States. So both these global powers, China and US, would be looking to entrench themselves through military bases in Pakistan so that they can dominate this region. And this could be detrimental for Indian influence in the Indian Ocean. China already has a formidable presence in Karachi and in Gwadar. And now US, if it were to invest in these ports and deploy military assets, that would essentially undermine India's military influence and strategic influence. So Pakistan might even escalate tensions with Taliban, with the neighboring Afghanistan. And this has serious challenges for India, for India's investments in Afghanistan. We have now somehow tried to rebuild ties with the Taliban to protect our interests in Afghanistan. But now Pakistan could potentially derail them by triggering a bigger conflict with Afghanistan. So there are serious regional and global geopolitical challenges that will come up for India. That is why I said at the start that India should sit up and take note of the changes that have taken place in Pakistan. It's a silent coup, a non-violent coup if you can call it, but it's a constitutional coup. So Asim Munir would essentially become the supreme leader of sorts with no checks and balances, no accountability. And this is likely to continue with subsequent army chiefs as well, thus cementing the position of the Pakistani army in Pakistan's politics. So clearly it has a big impact on India's policy, India's interest towards Pakistan and the region. So please take up this mains practice question. So based on what we have discussed, I would leave it up to you to build a good answer, practice your answer writing, and please, I request you to post your answers in the comments so it can help other students. So if you have liked the session, do press the like button. And if you want to share the video, do share it with other aspirants. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.